Developing a game isn't easy. Lots of ideas tend to get scrapped because they didn't work out as well in practice as on paper. Scenes were redundant or too long, or the developers didn't have the time or budget to implement them fully. Not all of these get cut before the game starts developing, though, and remnants can be found still within the games. So let's take a look at some what could have beens from across the series. In the original game, there are some alternate and extra story beats that still remain within the script but aren't actually used. So I've had to approximate what these might have looked like for this section. Gen and Commandol have this extra scene when you go through the Dunan Rapids that isn't used in the final game. The scene when you get to the fortress of Lorimar has been cut and was originally supposed to be longer. When confronting Sonya at the end of the game, she has some choice words for you that don't appear in the actual game. Clive also has an unused line when visiting Elsa's grave, where he actually falls for it, suggesting there might have been some sort of quest involved that would lead you there that could be failed. But if that's the case, no other trace remains of it. Matthew also has a line about how the Liberation Army should be divided into 5 battalions, each commanded by a general. And Murayama once talked about how Kasumi was supposed to die, or at least be killable, in the original game, but they ended up liking her too much, so they never implemented it. But a line by Hanzo still exists in the script in reference to this. The biggest thing, cut from Suikoden II, is the New Game Plus dungeon. This dungeon is supposed to appear in Saja after beating the Beast Rune, and has you collecting some red orbs to open a sealed door that leads to the Rune of Circulating Paths, that will offer to send you back to the start of the game in a new world with your levels and items intact. This is most likely how you were meant to be able to beat Rauden Chiaro, as it's incredibly tedious to attempt without having your weapon level upgraded beyond what the game allows at this point. The dungeon still exists in the original and PSP version of the game, but was completely removed for the remaster, though it is buggy, and prone to crashing even in the versions that have it. There are supposed to be boss fights, and it's indicated they're meant to be reused fights from the game, but they're also unfinished. Unfortunately, the dungeon is barely functional and the New Game Plus feature doesn't actually work, but the idea apparently survived pretty long into the development process. And as far as I know, Murayama never commented on its existence or why it got cut. The second game also has an unused rune, the Solitude rune, a weapon rune that increases your weapon damage the fewer people you have in your party. If you are the only person in the party, it would increase your attack by 200%. The rune still exists within the game files and can be accessed with a cheat device and is fully functional. There's also a couple of cut conversations in the war battles. During the battle where you can recruit Gilbert, once you successfully attack him, he'll say that maybe this is fate. But in the Japanese version, this line is a bit non sequitur as he says, perhaps this is another fate, referencing this cut conversation where Solon G tells him that his fate is to either work for him or die. There's also a cut conversation between Luke and Sasarai during the battle to rescue Ridley. Watari was meant to come with his own unique rune. The rune still exists within the game's code and can be acquired with a cheat device. However, it seems to have been cut early in development as the rune doesn't have a proper name, just a placeholder, the Watari Special, and there's no animation made for it. In a pre-release interview with Japanese gaming magazine Famitsu, character designer Fumi Ishikawa explained that part of the story would involve Duck Village being intentionally flooded. While she didn't elaborate on why or how, if you've played the game, you'll know this event doesn't actually occur. The reason for its exclusion isn't known. Perhaps the developers couldn't get it to work technically, or they had to cut it for time. However, the concept was reused in the manga adaptation, where Caesar comes up with the plan to flood the village to stop the Harmonian invasion from advancing. There's also an unused map icon for the Karaya village in the game's files that is a lot more stylized than the rest, but it's the only one in this style. And Suikoden IV was supposed to include the Resurrection rune, though the localization is a bit more literal this time around. While the rune can be added with a cheat device, it's not actually usable in the game. You can attach it to a character, but all the spells are unusable, so it appears to have been cut before any animations were completed for it. And finally, the remaster of Suikoden I and II originally had a classic mode. Around the time that the remaster was first announced, a beta build of it leaked onto the internet. This version was buggy and prone to crashing, and still had a lot of placeholder art, but it also had the ability to choose between remaster and classic modes, where classic mode would let you play the games with the original sprites and, for some reason, the old localization too. There are also some system messages where it warns you that you won't be able to switch mode later on, but you can't actually pick classic mode when starting a new game, though it will ask if you want to switch modes when loading a saved game, so who knows what was going on there. It doesn't actually start the game in classic mode even if you choose that though. Instead, you have to use the dev menu. This made it possible to switch modes during gameplay, though it would reload the area you were currently in, meaning you could get stuck behind obstacles in some cases. In the final release though, all classic assets have been removed, and only some leftover pieces and messages still exist to hint at its existence. Konami never actually announced that this mode would be included, so there are no reasons given for its exclusion in the final game.